Hey, welcome to Think Thursday from the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. Think Thursday is all about your beautiful, brilliant human brain. We're talking neuroscience. We're talking behavior change. We are talking about your mindset. Are you ready to get started? Let's go. Hey there, it's Molly, and welcome to Think Thursday from the Alcohol Minimalist. You know, I talk all the time about our beautiful, brilliant human brains. And on this podcast, we spend a lot of time talking about mindset and behavior and neuroscience and those little things that shape how we think and feel and function in our everyday lives. Today, I want to talk to you about a kind of exhaustion that I think has become so normal for many of us that we barely question it anymore. You know that feeling at the end of a work day when you close your laptop, or maybe you finally stop answering emails, or you finish that one last Zoom call, and somehow you feel completely wiped out, even though physically you have barely moved all day? Your brain feels foggy, your body feels heavy, and instead of wanting to go do something energizing or creative or restorative, all you really want to do is collapse onto the couch, scroll on your phone, and maybe do that while you're half watching television at the same time. And what's interesting is that this kind of tired feels very different from physical tiredness. It's not that satisfying exhaustion that comes after a long hike or a busy day in the yard or even cleaning out the garage. It's this strange combination of mental overload and physical stagnation where your nervous system feels overstimulated while your body simultaneously feels underused. I recently listened to a TED Talk from journalist Manoush Zomorodi that explored this exact issue. And the conversation immediately grabbed my attention because it connected so many things that we've talked about already on Think Thursday. We've talked about attention fatigue. We've talked about mental clutter, recovery, nervous system overload, and the impact really of constant stimulation, which is so prevalent in the world today. But this conversation added another really important layer that I think we often miss. Your brain is not just a thinking machine. Your brain is part of a moving biological system. And when movement disappears from daily life, your brain pays a price too. Now, I think most of us have been conditioned to think about movement and exercise as this completely separate category of life. We have work, and then if we are lucky or disciplined enough or motivated enough, we also exercise. But the research coming out now is suggesting something much more foundational than that. The issue may not simply be whether we work out. The issue may be how long we remain physically sitting still or inactive while mentally engaged. Because it turns out that sitting still for hours at a time while asking our brains to process information nonstop creates a very specific kind of strain on the body and the nervous system. In that TED Talk, Zomorodi references research from Dr. Keith Diaz at Columbia University, who studies sedentary behavior and health outcomes. And one of the things his research found was that just 5 minutes of gentle movement every 30 minutes had significant effects on blood sugar and blood pressure regulation. Not intense exercise, not a hard workout, just small, consistent interruptions in prolonged sitting. And what I found especially fascinating was that people in these studies didn't just experience improvements in physical health markers. They also reported better focus, more energy, improved mood, and in many cases, they felt more productive after taking movement breaks instead of less productive. And honestly, I think that surprises people because somewhere along the way, we started acting like the ideal worker or the ideal productive person is someone who can remain glued to a chair for 10 hours straight without interruption. We've normalized this idea that powering through discomfort is somehow a badge of honor, even though our biology is quietly telling us otherwise all day long. One of the most interesting concepts discussed in this TED Talk was something called interoception. And I think this is one of those neuroscience concepts that once you hear it, you suddenly start seeing it everywhere. Interoception is your brain's ability to recognize and interpret signals coming from inside your body. Hunger, fatigue, tension, stress, thirst, the need to move, the need to rest. It's essentially your internal awareness system. What researchers are increasingly finding is that highly immersive screen environments can interfere with interoception because our attention becomes so extremely captured that we stop noticing what our bodies are trying to tell us. And honestly, when I heard that, I thought, okay, well, that explains a lot. Because how many times have you ignored hunger because you were busy working? Or realized you needed to go to the bathroom long after your body first signaled it? Or noticed your shoulders were tight only after the headache showed up? Or continued scrolling long after you were actually tired because your brain was still chasing stimulation even though your body wanted rest? We override biological feedback constantly now. And I don't say that with judgment because I absolutely do it too. There are days when I spend hours recording, editing, writing, researching, responding to emails, doing work at the office. And by the end of the day, I feel depleted in this really strange way that doesn't actually feel restorative even after I stop working. Sometimes I'll realize that I've spent nearly the entire day mentally engaged while barely moving at all, except maybe walking to go to the bathroom or refill my coffee cup. And the reality is that our brains evolved under completely different conditions than the ones we live in now. We know that, right? Historically, humans moved while thinking. We walked while problem solving. We learned while exploring. And we socialized even while we were moving. Our bodies and brains evolved together, not separately. But now we process enormous amounts of information while remaining physically still for much of the day. And our nervous systems are trying to adapt to something evolutionarily very new. There's also fascinating research around attention fatigue and cognitive overload that helps explain why this kind of exhaustion feels so uniquely draining. Your brain is continuously filtering notifications, messages, headlines, emails, tabs and decisions, and visual input and information streams, often without any real pause or recovery time between them. And even when we think we're relaxing online, our brains are still processing novelty and stimulation. And I think this is where modern life gets especially confusing because we sometimes equate screen time with rest. But neurological rest is not necessarily the same thing as the absence of work. I want you to hear me say that again. Neurological rest is not necessarily the same thing as the absence of work. Sometimes what the brain actually needs is lower stimulation, less input, more rhythm, more breathing, more silence, and yes, more movement. More opportunities for the nervous system to settle instead of continuously consuming information. There's also research involving the default mode network, which I've talked about before on the podcast, which that network that is in the brain associated with reflection and memory integration. It's the place where creativity and internal processing happens. The default mode network tends to become more active during moments of wakeful rest. Things like walking, showering, daydreaming, looking out the window, folding laundry, or allowing your mind to wander without immediately filling it with some sort of stimulation. And I think this is one reason so many people say that they get their best ideas in the shower or while they're walking, because these things change brain activity. Outdoor exposure changes brain activity. Posture and breathing patterns can change brain activity. Movement changes brain activity. And research has shown us that walking can improve creative thinking and problem solving compared to remaining seated, which honestly makes so much sense when you think about how different your mind feels after being outside for even 10 minutes. One thing I really appreciated about this TED Talk is that it didn't turn into an unrealistic anti-technology conversation, because that's not practical, and honestly, it's not the point. Technology is a part of modern life. I use technology every day, probably every hour. And you're listening to this podcast using technology. The goal is not elimination. The goal is reconnection. How do we remain connected to modern life without becoming disconnected from our own biology in the process? And thankfully, the solutions here are often much smaller and more approachable than people think. The research suggests that consistency matters more than intensity. Tiny movement breaks throughout the day appear to have an outsized impact physiologically. Standing up and stretching, walking during phone calls, taking a lap around the block, marching in place while waiting for dinner to heat up, walking through the airport instead of sitting at the gate, getting outside for even a few minutes between meetings. These things sound almost too simple to matter, but the body responds powerfully to interruption. Blood flow improves, breathing changes, muscles activate, blood sugar regulation improves, and attention resets. Honestly, I think one of the biggest takeaways from all of this is that movement is not just about fitness. Movement is communication. Your body interprets movement as information about safety and regulation and energy demand, which means movement is not simply a calorie-burning activity. It's part of how the nervous system maintains balance. And maybe that's why so many people report feeling emotionally better when they move consistently throughout the day, even in small ways. Less anxious, less irritable, more mentally clear, more emotionally steady. Because the brain and the body were never meant to function as separate systems. And I think there's something really compassionate about recognizing that your exhaustion may not always mean that you're lazy or unmotivated or doing life wrong. Sometimes your body is simply asking not to be ignored for 10 straight hours while your brain absorbs endless stimulation. Sometimes your nervous system is asking for circulation and oxygen and variation. It's asking for recovery instead of another layer of input piled on top of fatigue. So maybe this week the goal isn't optimization. Maybe it isn't becoming some perfect wellness person who suddenly has an elaborate morning routine and a standing desk treadmill and a cold plunge in the garage. Maybe the goal is simply interruption. Interrupt the routine. Interrupt the autopilot. Interrupt the endless stream of stimulation long enough to ask yourself a very simple question. What does my body need right now? Because your beautiful, brilliant human brain was never designed to exist only from the neck up. It was designed to act with your whole body, your whole beautiful moving body. You know, I found an app this week. I don't even remember which one I picked because there's tons of them on your phone that you can get to remind you to stand up. You can set the timer, once an hour, once every 2 hours to remind yourself to stand up and to move. And I'm going to use it because I think it's that important. I hope you'll give something like that a try, but whatever you do, get yourself moving just a few minutes every hour. All right, that's all I have for you this week, my friends. Choose peace, and I will see you on Monday.